All right, so the question on slide 6 gives you this ordered pair, and it asks you to solve for the 6 trig function. So the first question you need to ask yourself is, when in the unit circle does the ordered pair have the exact same value? Not necessarily paying attention to the sign. And that's any time that the denominator is 4. Now, ask yourself, what quadrant am I in when my x is negative and my y is positive? So I travel left on the x and up on the y, and I end up in quadrant 2. The rule in quadrant 2 is that the numerator is 1 less than the denominator. So I know that the value that they're asking me to find is cosine of 3 pi over 4, and so on for the rest. Okay? So I ask you guys, what is the rule for cosine? The x value. So good. The x value in this case is negative radical 2 over 2. And I'm done with cosine. What is the rule for sine? The y value. So positive radical 2 over 2. And I just solved the 2 easiest ones. What is the rule for tangent? Right. So I'm going to say sine, which is radical 2 over 2, divided by cosine, which is negative radical 2 over 2. When I divide fractions, I keep, change, and flip. You could also remember in your head, when you divide two numbers that are identical to each other, you end up with 1. It's like saying 5 divided by 5 or 6 divided by 6. So I just end up with 1. And then a positive divided by negative is negative. Or if you look down here to our key change split, you'll see that everything cancels, and I'm just left with negative 1. Okay? What is the rule for secant? Flip cosine. So I get negative 2 over radical 2. What's wrong with this? Right, I shouldn't have that radical in the denominator, so I'm going to multiply by radical 2 over radical 2. I end up with negative 2 radical 2 over 2. And if you stop there, you're technically still right, but these 2's reduce, so the cleanest answer would be negative radical 2. All right, what's the rule for cosecant? Flip sine, so I have 2 over radical 2. If you can catch that that is the same value as secant just with a positive, you know that your work is going to be the same thing. What is my final answer going to be here? Just the positive square root of 2. Okay, you can jump to that conclusion. If you've in the same problem done that work, you don't have to do the work again, okay? And what is my rule for cotangent? Flipping tangent. What do you think I'm going to get if I flip negative 1? Negative 1. It's like saying putting negative 1 in a fraction. And then if I flip that, I still have negative 1 over 1. Okay? We are done with this problem. All right, so the next thing we're going to look at is how degrees and in angles and in radians work when you're going negative, okay? So a regular unit circle goes counterclockwise. So we know this first dot would be 30 degrees, then 45, then 60, and so on. So when we travel, when we're talking about a negative degree, we travel in the opposite direction. So instead of going upward, we just go downward, and this would be negative 30. This would be negative 45. Negative 60, and then down here, positive was a 270, but negative, it's a negative 90, okay? And then, of course, this would be negative 180, negative 270, and negative 360, exactly. And the same would work with radians. So, like, I can put negative pi over 2 here in this spot. I put negative pi over 4. I can call this negative pi. I could call this negative 3 pi over 2. And I can call this negative 2 pi. It's the same exact thing as the unit circle, just going backwards. Okay? All right, so the questions that come up, quiz, test, homework, and future classes, is not necessarily to ask you all 6 of a location, but to ask you one specific trig function of one specific value. So the 3 steps you're going to take anytime they ask you to solve for a trig function or find the value of a trig function are right here. Step 1 is to make sure that theta is coterminal. A reminder that coterminal is a value of theta in between 0 and 360 or 0 and 2 pi. So if the value is too big, you subtract 360 or 2 pi. If it's negative, too small, then you add 360 or 2 pi. Once you make sure that your value is coterminal, then you find theta on your unit circle. Feel free to have your unit circle next to you now as we do these problems. And then step 3 would be to apply the trig function. So like we said, cosine is the x value, sine is the y value, and so on, and those rules, okay? Unit circle needs to be memorized. Strongly recommend memorize. So the first set of questions, I'm going to call them level easy. The reason why I call them level easy is because they are already going to be coterminal, meaning you get to skip step 1, okay? When I do the next set of questions, they'll be level hard, and that's because they won't be coterminal, and we'll have to take that additional step 1. All right? So, first question. You're going to see me go through all 3 steps. Is 5 pi over 4 coterminal? Yes. So remember, the way I check that is double my denominator would be 8. Does 5 surpass 8? Nope. So I am good. I am within the 2 pi. Step 2, find theta on my unit circle. What quadrant is 5 pi over 4 in? Quadrant 3. That numerator is 1 more than my denominator. Okay? Over 4, what's my ordered pair in quadrant 3? Over 4s have the same number, so radical 2 over 2 for both of them. And then in quadrant 3, they are both negative. Okay? You're done with step 2. Step 3 is apply the trig function. What is the rule for cosine? It's the x value. Okay? So, what is my answer here? Negative radical 2 over 2. This is what you're going to go through for each of these questions, okay? Good? Talk to me. What's your question? So the ordered pair I grabbed from my unit circle, and just like the problems we did earlier, those ordered pairs are how I'm going to be able to start finding my sine, my cosine, my tangent, and all that, okay? So, let me give you another one. Let's find specifically tangent of 5 pi over 3. Step 1, is this coterminal? Yep, double my denominator would be 6. And then does 5 surpass 6? Nope, so I am good. Next, 5 pi over 3, what quadrant is that in? Good, quadrant 4. Anything over 3, what's my ordered pair? Right, first the 1 and then the 3. So 1/2 over radical 3 over 2. And in quadrant 4, my sign should be with a finger trick. Sine over 3. And in quadrant 4, I know that only the y is negative. Okay? And now, what is my rule for tangent? Sine over cosine. So, negative radical 3 over 2 divided by 1/2. Keep change flip. The 2's cancel. And what is my final answer? Negative radical 3. How are we doing so far? Yeah, that's fine. All right, last level easy. No. Then we're going to do level hard. Cosecant of 5 pi over 6. Step 1. Is this coterminal? Yes. What's double 6? Did I surpass 12? Oh, I'm good. What quadrant am I in? 2. You can also tell because my numerator is 1 less than my denominator. Ordered pairs over 6. Right, I have this 3 first and then the 1. And in quadrant 2, my x is negative and my y is positive. Okay? Step 3, what is the rule for cosecant? Good. The rule is to flip sign. Right, so my sign is right here. If I flip that, I get 2 over 1, which is 2. And you are done with level easy. Okay. All right, so the next few examples I consider level hard just because now we're going to have to take more action on step 1. Okay? So, the first one is going to be cotangent of 9 pi over 4. Step 1, is this coterminal? No. Double the denominator would be 8. Did I surpass 8? Yes, so what do I need to do to this 9 pi over 4? Subtract 2 pi. Common denominator. I have 9 pi over 4 minus 8 pi over 4. What's 9 pi minus 8 pi? 1 single pi over 4. Okay? That value that you get from coterminal is the value that you're going to continue on with on step 2. So on step 2, what quadrant is pi over 4 in? Quadrant 1. And what's my ordered pair? Good. Both positive, radical 2 over 2. Okay? And then we take step 3. What is my rule for cotangent? Right. So, radical 2 over 2 divided by radical 2 over 2. What do I get when I divide two identical things with each other? I get 1. Okay. All right, next. Cosine of 5 pi over 2. Step 1. Is it coterminal? Nope. Double my denominator would be 4. Did I surpass 4? Yep. So what do I do to 5 pi over 2? Subtract 2 pi. Get a common denominator. I have 5 pi over 2 minus 4 pi over 2. What do I end up with? Pi over 2. This value, pi over 2, is what I'm going to continue step 2 with. Where is pi over 2? It's It's not even in a quadrant, correct? It's right on the top at 90 degrees. What's my ordered pair at 90 degrees? 0, 1. You don't have to put a quadrant up. And then step 3, they're asking me for the cosine. What's the rule for cosine? It's your x value. So what is my answer? Yep. It's 0. Little too easy? Yes, but once I start teaching you a shortcut for tangents, it'll only work on the right hand. I'll go over, doctor. Remind me. All right. Secant of negative 3 pi over 4. Step 1, is it coterminal? Why? It's a negative. So what am I going to do to fix this? Nice. We're going to add 2 pi. Get common denominator. What does a negative 3 pi plus 8 pi give me? 5 pi over 4. Good. 5 pi over 4 is the value I'm going to use for step 2. What quadrant is 5 pi over 4 in? Good. Okay. And what's my ordered pair there? Good. I know anytime it's over 4, I have those radical 2 over 2's. And in quadrant 3, all right, so step 3 is to find secant. What's the rule for secant? Secant is to flip cosine, okay? So if I flip cosine, I end up with negative 2 over radical 3. Oh, just kidding. 2 over radical 2, sorry. And then what's wrong with that? Good, I need to rationalize it. And I end up with negative 2 radical 2 over 2. And the 2's cancel out, so I just have negative radical 2. Okay? Very last thing for today. Okay? Is not every value will exist on the unit circle. Okay? So when that happens, I'm going to let you use your calculator. Okay? So, for starters, your mode needs to be on radians. Okay? I'll show you right now. Okay. So, let me pull this up a little bit. Okay. All right. So, in my calculator, right to the right of the button second says mode. When you go to mode, the fourth row says radians or degrees. You should be bold on the one that says radians. Okay? If the only time you go over and switch over to degrees is if they ask you for like, what is cosine of 17 degrees? Like they literally put degrees, that's the only time you switch over. Majority of the time we're in radians. So you're going to go back to the home screen by pressing second and mode. Okay? Now, down here, you should be able to see, bring this up a little bit, that the calculator has the button sine, cosine, sorry about that. Sine, cosine, and tangent, okay? So if I want, for example, cosine of, let's say, pi, you press second and the little arrow has the pi. Sorry for our announcement. So if you want cosine of pi, you literally just put it in and it'll give you the answer -1. Now notice that our calculator does not have secant, cosecant, and cotangent. So we learned these rules in the last video. So for example, if I want cosecant of, let's say, a value not on the unit circle, 2.2, I need to put 1 over sine of 2.2 in my calculator. So I use my alpha y equals to make the fraction. I put 1 over sine, and I put 2.2, and it will give me the correct answer, okay? Which in this case was 1.236.